everyone, we're going to continue on with book number 1, aka the Sipapu Oddessy, and the segment we're going to start on is called Space Brothers. As the five approached the spacecraft, Steve remarked that he had not seen the craft until they were quite near relative to where he felt it should have been visible. Due to its large size, it should have been visible for a long distance, and he inquired as to why they had not seen it sooner. Yorgos answered that there is an electromagnetic field around the craft which would cause it to be invisible when the field is activated. Once the individual's own personal vibration frequency was elevated, however, it would always be visible. He pointed out that Steve and Diana had made the transition into a higher dimensional vibration frequency, which would continue to increase as they became more attuned. As they entered the craft, two people moved forward to greet them, and Yorgos introduced them. One was a tall man, about 6 feet in height, slim and bearded. His beard was very well trimmed, and was of light brown color, which matched the color of his hair. The man's name was John, and he had a warmly glowing and gentle smile. Energy and love radiated from his presence. Diana was instantly drawn back to the feeling she experienced in the presence of the energy form within the light as they had emerged from the tunnel. Hipkiss noticed the reaction and quickly spoke up in order to put the two at ease. He explained that John was an entity who had attained the ability to move intradimensionally. His creation had originated in one of the highest dimensions, and he had come to planet Earth specifically for the purpose of teaching. He would be working with them both to enable them to raise their personal vibrations to an even higher level. He was to be a guide from a high-frequency spiritual aspect. Yorgos added that the real value is in the spiritual aspect and knowledge, and that the Space Brothers were to be only assistants and helpers. The second man was not quite as tall and had very light hair and eyes. He was dressed rather casually in an earthly manner. Yorgos introduced him as Richard, and said Richard had a very interesting history which would be enjoyable to share. Richard had most recently come from Peru. Yorgos noted with humor that Richard was a fellow cosmonaut who had agreed to manifest on Earth planet for the purpose of awakening Earth brothers and begin early stages of enlightenment. Richard's frequency had zipped down near zero when he had passed into the lower density of Earth's atmosphere. Because of that, he had wandered about rather aimlessly for years in Earth time. He had gone to Peru, and the opportunity was correct for Athenia to join him and cause him to remember his purpose. Athenia and Richard had been married prior to the Earth escapade, so it was especially pleasing that she would be the one to work with him in Peru. Athenia and her comrades from outer space were based in the Andes Mountain at that time. Richard's mission was to experience from the aspect of a human and then write about those experiences. The information would further validate the existence of Space Brothers and accurately begin to establish their correct relationship. Earthman had a most heavy urge to make the brothers some type of god being, and that misconception was to be corrected. Yorgos was obviously enjoying himself very much at Richard's expense. Steve was sure that there would be some amusing stories regarding Richard's experiences as a human. As the group arranged themselves on the cushions offered them, Athenia moved hers next to Richard and settled comfortably against his knees. Steve studied her intently. He had never seen such eyes as Athenia's. They were blue, and yet that didn't quite describe them. They were iridescent blue, silver, and bottomless. He felt that one might be able to see into her very essence through them. She was also to be a teacher. Yorgos explained that he was referred to as the commander. However, he explained that the term was not quite suitable as used in the Earth plane. They had not originated on a free will planet, and thus were not plagued by wars, crimes, and political nonsense. They had no need of status titles, but rather used symbol titles representing categoric responsibility. Hippos was the recognized medical person, but it was explained that once again the definition lacked clarity for his type of medical practice. Did not resemble anything like that practiced on the Earth on the human level. Athenia was a technical person who would be classified in Earth language as a scientist or professor. Yorgos said that they all had equivalent skills in most categories, but each had his own individual area of responsibility. He noted all were skilled pilots to facilitate rotation of flight responsibilities. He promised to demonstrate that skill in a few days. Athenia interrupted the conversation, saying she felt energy vibrations indicating concern regarding the physical person known as Bob. She was correct, as Steve and Diana were deeply concerned about their friend. Athenia said for them to be at ease because Bob had remained in his mortal body and was presently being cared for by their Indian brothers in the pueblo across the valley. They were told it would be a while before he would be able to see them due to his low vibration density. They would, however, have the ability to observe him. With the training and exercises which were planned for him, however, his would only be a temporary inability. The overall plan was for the three of them to experience the lessons as a group. Athenia continued by sharing that it was planned for the three to function as an integral part of an extremely important mission. The mission was involved with a gathering and would require extensive explanations. First, she suggested they should adjust to their new environment. Yorgos smiled his captivating smile and said there'd be a lot of fancy footwork and fun, which would make the learning period extremely enjoyable. He promised that many ship flights for lots of sightseeing. He said there were many Earth places of importance that should be pointed out to them. His demeanor reflected the anticipated fun. He pointed out, however, that there would also be many more difficult activities in which to participate after they returned to the physical form. He figured this should be a most delightful interim. He rambled on about how they would be shown demonstrations through pictures using holograms. He then explained that those holograms would consist of active participation within the scenarios. This would be technically produced by a method of displaying projections originating from a laser beam apparatus aboard the craft. He captivated them with his enthusiastic description of how the apparatus functioned. They failed to understand any of it. He said it was the greatest form of entertainment, and they didn't question him regarding that probability. Yorgos appeared to be completely entertained by everything, and had the ability to make the enthusiasm contagious. This new Oddessy was undoubtedly going to be remarkable. After a bit more conversation, Yorgos offered them a tour of the craft, which they eagerly accepted. As they had approached the entry door, they all put on insulated foot coverings. It was explained that the insulated footgear would not conduct electricity and would prevent risk of electrical shock. The main room appeared to be about 25 feet in diameter. Additional rooms were visible off the main room. All light was of some type of indirect arrangement, and the room appeared simply glow. There was an almost continuous panel of controls surrounding the room, only interrupted by doorways and view tunnels. The floor could be made transparent from several locations on the control panel, giving total visibility. In addition, there were multiple view areas for clear visibility above. It appeared the entire ceiling panels could also be converted to a single transparent shield. Viewports completely surrounded the craft. Athenia demonstrated many of the technical controls, which she pointed out one by one. There were many electromagnetic reactors, which were fascinating. Steve's interest was completely absorbed in the anti-gravity device that was so simple in concept that it baffled his mind. Mercury seemed to be the important single element used in the device. Although there were also finely tuned copper and gold wires encircling the central mercury core. In the energy thrust system, there were similar components surrounding what appeared to be a crystal. Yorgos grinned and assured the two that the devices would be made available to Earthlings when the time is suitable. He also assured them that they would be told of these things during the teaching sessions. Gold was used extensively in the power system, and Yorgos said gold was very easily obtained. Steve chose to let the remark go unquestioned until a later time. There was no way Steve and Diana could even begin to imagine the wondrous adventures ahead for them. And in the following days, instruction sessions were intense. They saw very little of Richard, Hipkiss, and John, but Athena and Yorgos were with them constantly. They had been given marvelous living quarters, and all comforts were provided them. Hours were spent in vibration-raising exercises, extensive discussion sessions, as well as intensive input regarding projects underway by the higher energies. Those projects were to be manifested on the Earth plane. They were continually updated regarding Bob's condition and were assured that he would be ready to join them soon. They were told that the instructions he was receiving from the Indian master were of utmost importance. They would also be given those teachings. Yorgos said they were very fortunate to be able to experience the Indian guide in such a personal way. He said for the first time the oral teachings of the Ancient Ones would be recorded and made available to Earth people. The Indian medicine man was currently working on those gifts, after having been given permission by the Ultimate One, whom they lovingly referred to as Grandfather. Yorgos said many wondrous things were being made available to the human brothers, and his only wish would be that they would be used wisely. He said the time literally run out for further blundering on planet Earth. Either human species would change their ways, or they would most surely reap destruction. And because Earth activities had now moved out into space in such a way as to endanger safety of the entire universe, participation would now be required from the outer dimensions. He assured them they would have a thorough explanation regarding those subjects. Yorgos told them that there were other such groups gathered at other locations throughout the planet, so the emphasis for this group would be on instructions regarding the United States. Other locations would be shown and mentioned only as necessary to complete a project structure and/or when relative to a joint project. He said a very major gathering was being set up currently, and that the highest of energy forms from both the spiritual realms and the cosmic realms would be present in the 40 area known as California. Therefore, great emphasis was being placed on the United States. He explained the necessity of the movie which Bob, Steve, and Diana were producing. He said every detail had been a directed project, even if they had not been aware of that, and that each detail had been planned, even to the location. He told them the gathering would take place under disguise as a scene in the motion picture. He said the projected film of The Gathering would take place in the Tehachapi at the same time that the town would be celebrating its annual mountain festival. That way, the local people would participate without realizing there was anything other than the motion picture filming taking place. He explained why timing had been so important and why it had been necessary to relocate their residents to that place. He promised to discuss the wind energy farms, their use and intended purpose at a later time. Behind the facade of the movie and the consequent filming, the very highest energies would become manifest. In addition, the Space Brothers would become visible to the humans gathered for film participation. There was planned a great massing of spacecraft. There would be entity energy exchanges via craft beams. Yorgos explained that there were already energies working through a human at Edwards Air Force Base near Rosamond to arrange safe passage for the spacecraft under the guise of special effects. That would cover the appearance of radar glitches which might be seen from Edwards. The overall plan would be to have the gathering film all the details, have present many of the highest energy forms from spiritual realms, and have human personalities of such prominence by the dozens, so there would be no misunderstanding as to the validity of the happening. The spaceships, as well as galactic commanders and cosmonauts, would also be present in a spectacular display, so that no portion of the event would be discredited. Earth astronauts would be brought in under the guise of participation in a peace segment within the movie. Yorgos emphasized that the astronauts who had experienced spaceflight were well aware of spacecraft from other places in the universe. The Hensleys were assured that those necessary for the unsuccessful consummation of the project would be properly informed. Preparations were not only underway, but were almost complete. The days passed quickly, and there were several fantastic spacecraft flights. Athenia and Richard had to go to Peru to finalize some arrangements in that location, and Steve and Diana were allowed to accompany them. Richard's and Athenia's plans were to remain in Peru for several days, so schedules were made for Yorgos to return for them. Yorgos took a bit of extra time to allow Steve and Diana to see some of the historic land sites. They were shown the Nazca Plains, and the giant drawings were explained. They were taken over Machu Picchu and actually into Lake Titicaca. Sorry if I mispronounced that. It was totally breathtaking. Yorgos was spellbinding as a tour guide and kept their complete attention with stories and explanations. He told of one known as Thedra, who was a very, very special being. She had been sent to Titicaca, and while there, was given the greatest of teachings from the great master himself. She recorded all the teachings, and they were now available through her in Mount Shasta, California. He said she was now 87 or 88 Earth years of age, but was still physically active and remained intellectually brilliant. He said she had become extremely weary of Earth existence and continually told the Space Brothers who lived with her and tended her that she only remained in this dimension to experience the long-awaited gathering. He grinned widely and said he anticipated some dandy happenings at the gathering, which would surely open some Earth eyes, while dropping many Earth chins. He said Thedra was very special within the space community also, and her vibrations were so keenly tuned that she already spent much time with the brothers on her home planet. He said she would simply leave at such time as she was finished here. He commented that Earthman was so blind and narrow of mind not to have perceived these things. He wondered how so many wrong ideas had made their way into Earth society. He allowed as how he was here to change some of those misconceptions, and it would happen very soon. Before returning to Utah, they were given a grand tour. Yorgos pointed out dozens of sites where there were hidden space bases. There were also shown the ancient ruins of the Incas, Aztecs, and Mayans. Special emphasis was placed on the little country of Belize and the ancient ruins located there. It was there that one of the famed crystal skulls was found. Yorgos explained that the secret of the skulls and the importance of their locations. They talked of important locations within the United States, but a decision was made to investigate those when Bob would be with them, due to planned personal involvement for the 3 Earth beings. The time was growing near for Bob to be joining them, Yorgos said. And that'll be the end of this segment. Thank you.